Okay, this is the last panel meeting for Police and Crime Panel of West Yorkshire for this current year, and I will start off with the introductions. I'm Councillor Mohammed Iqbal from Leeds. I'll be chairing the meeting today, and I will hand over to Samantha Wilkinson, the panel support officer, for introduction of other members.
Good morning. Today on the call we have councillors Russell Brown of Bradford, Carl Burke of Kirklees, Amanda Carter of Leeds, Mr Roger Grasby, independent member, councillors Peter Green of Leeds, Stuart Heppenstall of Wakefield, although he is actually joining us a little bit later, Mrs Jo Sykes, independent, Councillor Mark Thompson, Kirklees, and Councillor Sophie Whitaker of Calderdale. We've got officers supporting us today. We've got Sharon Fraser from Legal. We've got Luke Wyatt from Legal. We've got Fiona Bernardo from Police and Crime Panel, and myself, and James Lightfoot, who is live streaming the panel meeting.
Thank you, Sam. And can I hand over to the Commissioner to introduce himself and his team, please?
Yeah, good morning, Chair. Sorry, I'm just trying to get my video to work. Yeah. Morning, everybody. Mark Burns-Williamson, Police and Crime Commissioner, West Yorkshire. I think we have Julie Reid on the line from the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, and Janine Nelson from the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, and I think Alan Rees is due to join us as well from the West Yorkshire Combined Authority, and I can see we've got Ben Still as well from the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Another point I would like to add, since the Deputy Chair, Councillor Jackie Williams from Wakefield, is not on the platform as yet, and she may not be able to end, and in case I am dismissed from the platform, then Councillor Peter Gruen will be deputising and chairing the meeting during my absence. So to begin off with, on behalf of the panel, I wish to express sympathy with the Queen and Royal Family on the death of His Royal Highness, the Duke of Edinburgh, and to pay tribute to the late Duke of Edinburgh for a lifetime of public service and charity work. So if we could have a minute's silence. We would stand, but due to remote meeting, as you wish, we'll remain silent for a minute. Thank you. Okay, we'll start the meeting, and as you will know that the meeting is live streamed. We'll start with item 1, apologies and absence. Can I first of all introduce Fiona, the new addition to the Police and Crime Panel officer, who will be working with Sam. So Fiona, you're welcome. Thank you for joining us, joining the team. On apologies, we've got apologies from Councillor Mohammed Naeem. He is not well. He is dependent on oxygen, therefore is housebound and will be resigning from the panel and also from the council seat in future. We wish him the best of health. Lovely man, a huge contribution to the panel, and especially the complaints panel. So any other apologies, Sam?
Sorry. Yes, we've got apologies from Richard Dunbar and Jackie Williams, who's hopefully joining the meeting a little bit late. She had other appointments.
Okay, thank you. Item 2, approval of minutes from 19th of March and any matters arising.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you, Joe. Any urgent items to consider?
No.
No.
Thank you. Item 4, members declaration of interest. So we've got 2 independent panel members whose term of office will be extended for a short period until we settle down until autumn next year. So are we okay with that? I'm sure you've read the report.
Could I declare an interest in item 8, Chair? Formally.
Thank you.
And could I declare an interest in item 8, Chair?
Thank you. So we've all read the report and we're all in favour. Silence will mean that we all agree.
Sorry, that's later on the agenda. This was just declarations.
Okay, in terms of declaration, yes. So that takes us on to item 5, devolution and transfer of PCC functions. The reports are attached and I'm sure you've read them all. And is it Commissioner who's going to lead on this or combined authorities?
Chair, sorry, it's Mark. It's definitely to be led on by the combined authority, who will obviously explain the key aspects of the report. And you know, obviously, it's not for me really to report on this one. It's definitely the combined authority. So obviously, I'm grateful for Alan and Ben being in attendance this morning to do that. So I'll hand over to them if that's okay.
Thank you, Commissioner. The only concern we have as panel that we've not been able to see the report in advance. We only got it this morning, and unfortunately, because of IT issues, we can't share it on the screen. But Sam has emailed all the panel members, so those members who have a second device, they can follow the presentation. So can I hand over to Alan or Alan's colleague?
Yeah. Chair, thank you. Shall I just give a few words of introduction? I think.
Okay, Ben.
Thank you, Chair. So I think there is a paper in the pack that gives an overview of the item. What Alan and I would propose to do is to talk through three sections. I think you've asked us to give an overview of the combined authority and what the combined authority does by way of background and context, and I'll do that. Give a brief overview of the devolution deal that's led us to where we are now, and I'll cover that issue as well. And then Alan will come in and talk about the transition of the preparations that we're undertaking for the mayor to take on the PCC functions. So if you're okay with that, Chair, we'll proceed on that basis, and happy to be stopped at any time with questions if that'll.
Okay.
Wish.
Chair, just before Ben continues, can I just check? I mean, the report did go out with the papers last week, so I don't understand why.
It's the presentation, actually.
Ah, right. I think what you're referring to there, then, Chair, is just the slides that
slides
have been prepared. That's all. That's okay. Fine. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, just to come in there, I don't know if it's worth. I don't know if someone from the combined authority can try to share it. We seem to be having a problem that it won't share to external partners. It's only sharing across to Wakefield internal and for some reason Bradford as well. But so it might be worth someone from combined authority trying to share it direct.
Okay, can you give me? You'll have to bear with me 30 seconds.
As a backup,
in the interest of time, shall I start talking and Alan can try and see if we can get the slides to work? But We're always intending to talk to the slides anyway, so so their background, if that's okay. So shall I make a start, Chair?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So in the first section, I'll give a brief overview as to what the Combined Authority is and what it does. The Combined Authority is not an organisation, I think, that has that is particularly well understood and hasn't sought a high public profile. That's because it works very much in partnership with the 5 West Yorkshire local authorities, and because its primary functions that face members of the public and face the business community are done through other brands, and I'll come to that. So what the Combined Authority does, it acts across the whole of West Yorkshire, and it undertakes those functions that either through statute or through the agreement of the 5 West Yorkshire authorities are put in place in order to be discharged across the whole of West Yorkshire. So some things, such as being the local transport authority, are prescribed through statute, and other things, such as the work that we do on developing policy and supporting a single voice from the 5 West Yorkshire leaders, are done through the willingness of the 5 authorities to work together. So the Combined Authority is an organisation that's rooted in deep partnership. I'll cover the kind of 3 main areas in which the organisation works. Through the brand of Metro, which you'll see across West Yorkshire, particularly at bus stations and bus stops. The Combined Authority has the function of the local transport authority, and that means that we run some aspects of the public transport network, in particular bus stations, travel centres, information services, and we also then provide support to members of the public in their use of public transport. That comes through either providing bus services where the commercial market is not providing bus services to connect together communities, or providing concessions, subsidised travel, or free travel for elements of the communities that can least well afford to pay. So we're very much the organisation that helps make public transport a public service, and do that under the brand of Metro. Secondly, we work again at the West Yorkshire level and beyond, in providing provision of support to businesses, and that's either both directly supporting businesses in terms of advice and loans and grants, and also working on the skills agenda to help people, both young and mid-career, to develop the skills the businesses needs, with the intention really of having the employer at the heart of that relationship. So it's very much about trying to encourage the skills sector to develop the skills businesses in West Yorkshire need. And we run a number of programmes, some on behalf of central government, some in partnership with organisations like the Careers and Enterprise Company, and some developed ourselves to support businesses and people to develop their skills. We have recently, as a result of the devolution deal, taken on a broader function around skills as well, with the devolution of something called the adult education budget. That is funding that is already spent in West Yorkshire, and it equates to about £65 million per annum, that previously was controlled by central government and has been devolved to the Combined Authority to be allocated through local mechanisms. And I'll come back to a few more of the benefits of the devolution deal. But so we're an organisation that fundamentally is providing services to the public and to business in some quite specific areas where it makes sense to do so at the level of West Yorkshire. The Combined Authority also undertakes a number of what you might call financial and due diligence and accountability roles, in particular acting as accountable body for the local enterprise partnership, which is a voluntary partnership between the public and the private sectors, that in the past has had government funding channeled through it, and the combined authority has been the accountable body for that. In terms of the goals of the organisation, they are agreed through the combined authority, and the authority as a body meets on a bi-monthly basis. The organisation primarily has had 4 goals for the last couple of years, and I'll just run through those. Fundamental has been enabling inclusive growth. That is about in the pursuit of supporting economic growth per se across West Yorkshire. It's in making sure that the proceeds and the benefits of that growth are felt by as many people and as many communities as possible. That things like disparities in income are lessened, not increased, and attempting to work more, particularly in those communities that are more difficult to reach through public intervention and are more deprived. And so a number of our programmes are particularly tilted towards providing that kind of support. And that's become increasingly important through the COVID-19 pandemic and the recovery from it. One of the key pieces of work that the Combined Authority has done is develop a West Yorkshire-wide recovery plan that it's then begun to fund some of the programmes within that from some of the devolution funds that have been secured as a result of the devolution deal. Second core objective is also linked to economic growth, but this is around productivity. So although we have a focus on helping people find employment and increasing the employment rate, we're also very much supporting businesses and the private sector, increase the productivity of business enterprise. And we have a number of products and supports mechanisms that are supporting businesses to do that. Members will probably be aware that there is a productivity gap between the north and the south, and that's part of the government's levelling up agenda, and we're playing our part in looking at how that can be reduced. The third objective is around the climate emergency. In line with the 5 West Yorkshire authorities, the Combined Authority also declared a climate emergency in 2019 and has set a net zero carbon target. For the Combined Authority, that's set at 2038, which is obviously closely aligned to that which the government has set out over the course of this week. And we have a number of programmes that are looking to reduce the carbon impacts of West Yorkshire, and we've done some particularly important work, we think, on setting out the pathways for carbon reduction and how that will shape future policy and programmes. And then finally, the Combined Authority's got a role in, as I've said, in transport, but particularly in public transport and planning and the promoting and the business case and the development work for a future transport network for West Yorkshire. And we're currently, and have been since the beginning of the year, out to consultation on an ambitious connectivity strategy for West Yorkshire. So those are the 4 core objectives of the Combined Authority. You'll see that it's quite specific and it's all focused at the West Yorkshire level. For our business plan this year, we're adding 2 further objectives to that. One is around police and crime, and we'll be wanting to work with the mayor and with the team from the PCC to flesh out a clear objective around that. And then finally, as an organisation, we're undergoing so much change at the moment, and as part of the devolution deal, we have to bring into place something called the single investment strategy that will govern how we spend money, and a revised assurance framework. So we've got an objective around how we're ensuring efficiency with the new powers, with the changes to the organisation going forwards. The next thing I wanted to say is that in terms of decision making, the Combined Authority as an authority board has a set of delegations. The Combined Authority is a bit different to local authorities in this context, in that it works through a committee structure, and the authority itself can delegate to committees, but not to individual members. And so the committee structure for us is particularly important because that's the mechanism through which decisions are made in the most transparent way. Members might be aware, but the Combined Authority met yesterday and agreed in outline to reform and to change some of the decision-making structures, fully greater capacity and a greater set of delegations to committees, increase in the amount of work and funding that is coming through the Combined Authority. It's important to say that the mayoral powers that will come in around police and crime are not, those decisions are not taken through the Combined Authority. The mayor's functions and powers in terms of the PCC role are held as executive powers, and so they are discrete and separate from the Combined Authority's decision making. That said, I think the local authorities see the opportunity here for greater integration of the programmes that the Combined Authority does, and the potential for the role of the PCC. So that takes us through the governance. And my screen is changing as if a slide might appear, but it hasn't appeared yet. So I'll keep talking. That was what I wanted to say by way of an overview of the organisation. Shall I carry on, Chair, just to talk then about the devolution deal specifically?
Yeah, sure, Ben. Yeah.
Okay,
the screen hasn't appeared, so you can carry on. Yeah.
Okay. So a bit of background for the devolution deal. This was a deal that was agreed in March 2020, following an intense period of work between the 5 West Yorkshire authorities and government, facilitated by the Combined Authority. That deal was agreed just before lockdown began, really, last year, and over the course of this year, we've been through the process of turning that deal into the necessary legal steps to create both both the order that brings into effect the mayor and the consultation that was done over the summer to engage the public and other stakeholders in the process and in the changes that were made. In autumn last year, each of the 5 West Yorkshire authorities agreed to the creation of the mayoral order, and that was made into law in January this year. It's probably sensible to demarcate the devolution deal's kind of functions into 2 different kinds. There are some powers and functions that are associated with the Combined Authority as an organisation, and they particularly relate to the adult education and skills budget that I've already talked about, to some of the housing and some of the finance functions. So they relate to the Combined Authority. The mayor has some separate functions that can only be exercised when the mayor comes into office. The most high profile of those is around public transport and buses and the ability to franchise bus services within West Yorkshire, which is a power that only the mayor holds, for example. And the PCC powers fit into that category as well. They are, as I've said, they are executive functions, the mayor. In terms of the powers and the elements that come within the devolution deal, they fall into a number of categories, really. There are some around transport, there are some around skills, there are some around housing and finance, and as I've said, there are some around the PCC powers. And it's also worth saying at this point that the original intention of the deal that was signed last March was that the PCC powers wouldn't come into effect until the next round of local authority and mayoral elections in 2024. But the delay caused by local elections cancellation last year meant that an opportunity was taken to bring everything into line. So a lot of work that Alan will talk about in a moment has been done at some pace in order to get everything ready for the mayor taking on the PCC powers this year rather than in 2024. I think I'll stop at that point, Chair, and unless there are any questions, hand over to Alan, who can then talk about the particular work that's underway to affect that transition and for the mayor to take on the PCC powers.
Thank you, Ben. Is there any questions on Ben's contribution or presentation?
Chair, could I ask a question?
Councillor
I think in one of the very early slides, there's a reference to the combined authority and to the LEP. Perhaps, Ben, you could just clarify for us what the position of the LEP will be in the new arrangements.
Of course, yeah, it's a good question. At the moment, the local enterprise partnership and the combined authority are seen by government as separate things, and indeed they are separate. The combined authority is a statutory body created by a legal order. The local enterprise partnership is a voluntary partnership and comprises a private sector chair, 2/3 private sector members, plus the 5 leaders of the West Yorkshire authorities. The chair of the local enterprise partnership also sits on the combined authority as a full voting member, and because both organisations have got a remit around economic development and growth, what we've done is we work very closely to ensure that the objectives and the strategy work and the policies for both are best seen as 2 sides of the same coin, and they work very closely in partnership together. And indeed, we as an officer body support both organisations, facilitated by the fact that the combined body for the local enterprise partnership. Under the new arrangements, nothing changes in that regard, except that we've gone a stage further in suggesting that what you might call the substructures beneath the LEP and the combined authority have got greater delegation. They're common substructures, and so the subcommittee structure for the CA also would serve as the subcommittee structure for the local enterprise partnership, and that reflects the fact that because the combined authority is so involved in developing economic and promoting economic growth, having the private sector around the table and having a deep partnership there has proven very useful, and that's what we're looking to maintain under the new arrangements. It's also worth saying that the government is separately reviewing local enterprise partnerships, and we're expecting its initial findings from that review and recommendations will be made public before the summer break.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you. It's very helpful, Ben.
Okay.
Chair, I have a question, if I could.
Yes, Roger.
It's about accountability. You'll correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm not an elected member, but if given that members are not directly elected by the public to the combined authority but appointed by their respective authorities, how does the combined authority discharge its accountability, and to whom is it accountable?
So it's a great question. The first thing to say is that position changes with the election of the mayor, and when the mayor comes into office, they will become the chair of the combined authority. And although it's the combined authority that is accountable for public spend, of which the mayor is the chair, that does create a new link from a direct elected individual to the CA and its spend. In terms of accountability, like a local authority, the combined authority is still accountable to the public, and it has a local government scrutiny function that looks a lot like the scrutiny of a local authority. Again, as part of the devolution deal, and reflecting the fact that the amount of work that has gone through the combined authority has expanded and will expand as a result of devolution, CA has expanded or has taken steps to in June expand the scrutiny function, and we will have 3 scrutiny committees appointed at the AGM in June that will oversee the work of the combined authority, and they've got all the powers that a local authority scrutiny function would have, both pre and post decision call-in functions, for example.
Thank you. Any other comment or question for Ben?
The one other point I'd just make in response to Roger's question is that the combined authorities, and there are 10 combined authorities across the country, so they don't cover the whole country, are also highly accountable to government, because we have to have in place an assurance framework, and we have to do regular reports, and indeed we have an annual review with government. So we're both kind of monitored and held accountable by central government as well as by the local scrutiny committees.
Thank you.
Chair, should we pass over to Alan now to talk about the police and crime?
Alan, yeah. Transfer of policing and crime functions to West Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority. Alan, over to you.
Great, thank you, Chair. I hope everybody can hear me. I'm going to start by talking to some of what is in the main paper, which was circulated with the papers, and then I'll come on to a little more detail about the functions, some information about the role of Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime, and then finally end on the conclusions we have reached around how the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner will transfer into the combined authority in a little over 2 weeks' time. So, as Ben said, the original expectation was that the transfer would happen in 2024, and that was brought forward to 2021. So we have worked at pace, and there's been, I think, fantastic collaboration between combined authority teams and the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, who have approached this really positively, professionally and patiently, and I'd like to thank them all for that. We have managed it as a comprehensive programme, identifying all of the work streams that are necessary to enable the transfer to be enacted. So there has been, for instance, work streams around HR and IT, legal and estates. And at the front of our minds always has been the need to ensure that there is no interruption of service, that there is continuity of business as usual while the process is happening. And of course, we do recognise that this work has been required to be done on top of what has been a challenging year for everybody, not least those staff in the office of the ECC. So the overall principle has been that we would clearly the TUPE arrangements apply here, and our approach has been to enable the team to transfer as a block, as this into the combined authority, and that is what will happen on the 10th of May. We have created a new directorate within the organisation, which Ben spoke about earlier, on the structure of the organisation, to enable us not only take on the additional functions that come with becoming a mayoral combined authority, but also ensure that there's a place for the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner and the policing and crime functions to come in, and for that to be properly part of the wider organisation and not separately. And we will look in the future to identify benefits that can come from the functions being part of a mayoral model, where there are opportunities through both the convening power of the mayor and also links with the wider work that Ben has talked about around transport and skills and employment and business support and so on, which can help all of the regional partnership working in terms of bearing down on those wider determinants of crime. But the general position for now is that we're trying to ensure that the staff are able to transfer to the organisation as comfortably and as smoothly as possible, and there has been a range of engagement with members of staff, both about the process as a whole, which they've been fully engaged in, and each of the work streams has had kind of joint leadership from both the CA and the OPCC, but also in terms of learning about the two organisations. So several presentations from Combined Authority to the team in the OPCC about the work of the Combined Authority, but also going the other way, some fantastic presentations that we've had from members of the OPCC on the issues that they are working on, whether that is carrying out the functions of setting the police and crime plan and holding the Chief Constable to account, whether it is the broader partnership working on the criminal justice system and community safety, on the commissioning of the range of community safety, reducing reoffending and victim support services that the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office lead. Really grateful to all of those people who've put time and effort into helping us learn more about the work of the PCC. There are some issues that are to be worked through in the next couple of weeks. So we're just finalising, and this does link back to, as Ben said, there are a number of changes being currently discussed in the governance of the Combined Authority. There are similarly here, we're just working through some final details around how decision making might operate, and of course some of this depends on the mayor. When they are elected, they will have views, and I'll come to that now. So I think the slides are now, as I can see the slides, I'm not sure if everybody can, but I'll talk through them in any case. So the police and crime functions that the mayor has are exactly the same as those of the Police and Crime Commission. It's simply that that what are in law the Police and Crime Commissioner functions will be discharged in future by the mayor. So they continue to be that maintenance of effective and efficient police force for the people of West Yorkshire, holding the Chief Constable to account, issuing a police and crime plan, and the wider objectives around criminal justice and community safety and supporting victims. There are some functions which only the mayor can do. So that includes, for instance, issuing the police and crime plan, calculating a council tax or budget requirements. So in effect, what that means is that only the mayor can determine the precept, and thirdly, the function of appointing, suspending or calling on the Chief Constable to retire or resign is a function that can only be exercised by the mayor. They cannot delegate that. The mayor is able to appoint a deputy mayor for policing and crime, and I'll come on to say a little bit about the process there in a moment. There are some functions which can only be delegated as far as the deputy mayor for policing and crime, including, for instance, attending a meeting of the police and crime panel. So we're
losing you, Alan. There's a signal issue. We've lost you. Yes. We can still see you on the screen, but we can't hear you. Not see you, but your name's there on the screen. But the camera's not showing you, and we can't hear you.
Shall I?
Sorry, it kicked me out.
Where Alan left off.
It kicked me out.
Okay.
I'm back.
Okay,
I'm sorry, it kicked me out.
Okay,
kicked me out. Right. So I think I can't tell where you lost me. So I'll pick up from the mayor is able to appoint a deputy mayor for police who is able to exercise certain functions. There are some which the mayor can't delegate further than the deputy mayor for policing and crime, one of those being attendance at the police and crime panel. So the police and crime panel will always be attended by the mayor or the deputy mayor in the future. All of those decisions, though, will be supported by a scheme of delegation to officers, which we're currently working through. So Sam, I think you're driving the slides. If you are able to go on to the next one, then now's the time. Other way.
Okay, continue, Alan.
Yeah, thank you. So I mentioned a moment ago that the mayor is there are a couple of positions of deputy mayor. To be completely clear about this, there is a deputy mayor, not a deputy mayor for policing and crime. There is a deputy mayor, and that person has to be a member of the Combined Authority, and their role is to exercise the mayor's functions in the mayor's absence. The mayor then has an option, sorry, and that applies to the wider mayoral functions that exist, not policing and crime. The mayor then has an option to appoint a deputy mayor for policing and crime for the exercise of certain police and crime commissioner functions. They don't have to do that, but it is an option that they have in order to support them in discharging what is, of course, a very large area of business. Next slide, please. So the process for this, and the police and crime panel has a role to play here. If the mayor wishes to appoint a deputy mayor for policing and crime, then they have to propose that nomination alongside certain information like their suitability for the role and the terms and conditions under which they would propose to make that appointment. That then has to be reviewed and reported on by the police and crime panel, who will make a recommendation to the mayor as to whether or not the candidate should be appointed. At that point, the mayor can choose. At that point, the mayor can make their decision to appoint. So. I know that conversations have we've had some conversations with you, Chair, and with the officers supporting the panel to establish the process for this, to ensure that the process is in place to enable the mayor to appoint a deputy mayor for policing and crime in good time if they are if they wish to do so. We would expect that process to subject to what the mayor feels, to start sometime fairly soon after the mayor comes into office. Next slide, please. And then the final slide, and I'll describe what this slide says. So Ben talked earlier about the fact that we're changing the structure of the organisation and creating a new directorate, which I'm the director of, which is called Strategy, Communications and Policing. I then report to Ben as the managing director, and then the whole organisation is, of course, overseen by the mayor, the deputy mayor for policing and crime, and the wider combined authority. The plan will be that the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner transfers in as a service into the Directorate of Strategy, Communications and Policing, operating alongside a set of other central teams leading on overall strategy for the combined authority, our communications function, which of course will need close links with the policing and crime functions and indeed the violence reduction unit, and then our research, intelligence, analysis, kind of regional analytical function sits here as well. So that creates a kind of central intelligence team working on insight through to strategy, through to communications, alongside the policing and crime function. So and this has all been discussed and communicated with the team at a session earlier this week, and that will all take effect from the 10th of May. I think that is my final slide. I hope that's been a helpful update on where we are, where we're at, and clearly we're looking forward to working with members of the panel in the future, and recognise the important role that this panel plays in providing check and balance on the mayor's and deputy mayor's exercise of policing and crime functions and the wider contribution to that. Look forward to working with you in the future. Very happy to answer any questions that colleagues may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you for the presentation. Does any member have any question or comment on Alan's report?
I think, Chair, I indicated earlier on.
You did, Councillor Gruen, yeah.
Alan, that was very comprehensive presentation. Thank you ever so much. It's made things a lot clearer. I think our interest as a panel initially is in the continuity and business as usual. And the paper alluded to some IT interconnectivity difficulties. Now, my comment is not a criticism, because I fully accept that you have worked at incredible pace with lots and lots of detail. But I am interested and want some reassurance that the structures in the combined authority will be able to talk directly to the chief's staff, and there will be business as usual.
Thank you, Councillor Gowan. Alan, do you want to comment?
Yes, I will. So clearly there are information governance issues which we have been working through. It's absolutely crucial that the office is able to continue to discharge its functions, and mechanisms are being set up to enable that to continue. Where there is the office of the PCC, as it transfers over, will require some bespoke solutions to continue to access certain systems. We're working through those. I am very confident that they won't hinder the ability of the team to carry out the function, but they are moving on to a different system, and we do of course need to be mindful of the information governance requirements that brings with it. There are, I know, also kind of longer term potential solutions to accessing data and information on police systems that will come through in the future that will make some of this more straightforward. There are examples where I think the solution will be that there may be certain members of staff who will continue to have separate laptops for the sole purpose of enabling them to access police systems. But we do need to be mindful of there are certain barriers that exist which are reasonable around combined authority systems not having access to sensitive information within the police systems. So we're absolutely mindful of it, working through it. Everyone agrees that that there is a need for two things in parallel. The first being good information governance and good information security. Secondly, the office being able to continue to discharge its functions effectively and continue to have a good relationship with those members of staff within the police. So it's not. I'm being completely transparent. It's not entirely straightforward, but I'm confident that building on the good collaborative work that I described earlier, that we are finding good solutions to the challenges.
Thank you, Alan. Any other comments or questions from panel members?
Could I ask a question, Chair, please?
Roger Grasby, independent panel member.
Alan, as I understand it, the Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime could be an elected member of the Combined Authority, an elected member of one of the 5 constituent authorities, an official from one of the 5 constituent local authorities, somebody from Joe or GS Public, or indeed a police officer. Now, if I'm right, and those are the choices, and there may be others, does it mean that they would, in law, be different, have different status, i.e., an office holder, an employee, or something else? And does it matter?
Yeah, so there are different ways that they can be appointed. There are restrictions, and I don't believe that. So some of the people that you just described can't be. I'm just trying to clarify the information. They can't be a police officer, for instance. That's not correct, because police officers can't exercise police and crime commissioner functions, so they can't be a serving police officer. There is a list available of the restrictions, which I'm very happy to circulate to the panel, because clearly that is key information for when the panel has its deliberations over the person's suitability for the role. There are different ways in which they can be appointed, and one of those is as an employee of the combined authority. So there are different ways of doing it. Does it matter? The key thing is that they are that we have in place clear written arrangements for what their role will be, what the functions are that they're able to exercise on the mayor's behalf, and clarity around their terms and conditions. And as long as those things are in place, then the structure of how they are actually employed, as long as it's all totally transparent, is probably there are different ways of doing it, and that depends a bit on the mayor's choices that they make over what the role will do, and who it is.
Alan, Chair, can I
Thank you, Ben.
To add to Alan's answer? I think the fundamental distinction is between whether the deputy mayor, as the mayor wishes to appoint, is an existing member, in which case one set of processes apply, or whether they are an individual who's not an elected member, in which case fundamentally they in employment law terms they become an employee, but we would look to put in place arrangements that create the necessary space for the DMPC to undertake the duties.
Thank you, Ben. Roddy, are we okay with that?
Just one supplementary question. Is presumably it's up to the mayor as to whether or not they delegate which functions to a deputy mayor. Presumably they could be restrictive, could they, in what they delegate and retain more for themselves than the list in the paper?
That is absolutely correct. Yes, they have options. So there are certain things which they cannot delegate. One being the police and crime plan, the issuing of a police and crime plan, and the setting of the budget and the level of council tax. But other than that, they have choices about what they delegate, both in terms of the statutory functions, but also operationally in terms of what they carry out by way of the general day-to-day engagement on national issues, engagement in local partnership, engagement with the Chief Constable and senior police officers, community engagement work. They have a range of options as to how they go about sharing that responsibility between the mayor and the deputy.
And final question, do they have any say in how the panel organises itself? For example, if the panel said it wanted to meet every week, and as I understand it, there's an obligation on the mayor or the deputy mayor to attend panel meetings, would that be the end of the matter?
I'm not sure about that. I know that the panel has a power in law to require the mayor and the deputy mayor to attend. I can't remember what the balance on that is in terms of reasonableness. I'd have to check with colleagues who are responsible for the management of the panel. But I would expect that. So, do they have any say on it? It's not their decision how the panel conducts its business. The panel continues in its current under its current arrangements as a joint committee run by supported by Wakefield Council. But I would potentially expect that the mayor might want to have a conversation with the panel and the chair about how things operate in the future. Of course, it will be new to the mayor. So so I hope that kind of answers the question. But I'm not entirely sure as to the precise nature of the power that the panel has to require the mayor to attend.
Or get the mayor to clear their diaries.
Yeah.
Perhaps we could liaise with Sam and come back with a note to provide clarification.
Okay, thank you, Ben. And also, it would be subject to providing the reports for the panel as well and collating all the information. So, okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said previously, that one of the functions that the mayor is unable to delegate beyond the deputy mayor is attendance at the panel. So there cannot be a scenario where the mayor or the deputy mayor kind of sends an officer on their behalf to attend. They cannot delegate that function, so it will always be the mayor or the deputy mayor. I have found the additional information about the which is quite lengthy, so I won't read through it all, about the eligibility criteria for the deputy mayor. Now, of course, this will all be contained in the report that you will receive on the criteria, but just to confirm, if they are a member of staff or a serving police officer, they cannot be the deputy mayor for policing and crime. They cannot, and that is also they can't be from another area, fairly clearly, but and beyond that, the restrictions are around. They need to be somebody who's so suitable. So, for instance, not subject to bankruptcy restrictions or being convicted of imprisonable offences. There are a range of things like that. Okay.
Thank you, Alan. Any other last comment or?
Chair, could I just ask a question?
Yes, is that?
Yeah, it's Councillor Mark Thompson.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's reference to the role as deputy mayor. So I'm taking it from the conversation so far that this is an employed role. I'm just wondering about competency and the normal procedure of employing somebody. Would it go through the normal process? So it'll be a selection process, assisting the mayor on choosing a suitable deputy mayor, and using the usual equalities and etc. process. So it's just a general question about employment rules.
Alan, should I start that answer?
Yeah. Okay, Ben. Fine.
Yeah.
So I think the answer to the question is this is an appointment of the mayor, and so one of the challenges is how we make that work in that scenario. The criteria that the mayor wants to use in making that appointment is entirely up to the mayor, and the process is up to the mayor as well.
Thank you.
Right. So in this case, we don't have to follow normal employment rules, even though they will be employed by the West Yorkshire Combined Authority.
So we are still looking at the detail of how that would kind of be operationalised, but in effect, I think you're right, yes.
Thank you. Any other questions from anybody?
Yeah, just a supplementary on that. So okay. If it's not following the same rules as employment, does that mean the dismissal of an incompetent or ineffective deputy mayor doesn't follow the same process either?
That is one of the things that we are looking at. It's fair to say that the only precedent for this is the experience that they've had in Greater Manchester. So we're still working through some of the detail here, but it's because it's also the fact that the DMPC remains in post for so long as the mayor does. So in effect until the term of the next election. And again, that's we're having to look at how that works within kind of employment T's and C's.
But all those processes will be in place before a deputy mayor is the recruitment process is put in place.
There will be clarity on all those issues, yes. But as I said, this is an appointment of the mayor. It isn't necessarily a recruitment process.
In terms of the transparency over the conditions, at the point at which it makes the nomination, the police and crime panel, the terms and conditions have out. So I think that question is on.
Alan, we've lost you.
No.
Yeah, it keeps coming and going, the voice.
I think what Alan's saying is that the questions that Councillor Thompson is asking would all need to be addressed in the paper that would come to you.
Okay.
Consider the appointment confirmation.
Exactly.
Thank you, Ben.
Chair, sorry to cut in, but
Okay,
for Mark's benefit, this came up in 2012 with the appointment of the Deputy Commissioner, as the other Mark Burns-Williamson will remember, where the Minister actually said in the House that it was a police and crime commissioner could appoint their partner, their mother or their father as their deputy if they so wished. It is a personal appointment. Well, it was in the case of the Deputy Commissioner, the Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner, and it seems from what colleagues have said that those arrangements will transfer to the new regime.
That's probably correct, yes.
Okay.
Chair, if I may come in again on something very different. I want to
Okay.
change the focus
Councillor, go on.
slightly. We've heard from the Combined Authority, and obviously we know from the Police and Crime Commissioner. It would be interesting for the panel to hear from the Chief himself in terms of his immediate operational priorities remaining as they have been up to now. I know it's there's uncertainty for him, his team and his force, but the panel wants to know that the kind of policies we've been working on with him are continuing, at least for the time being.
Thank you, Councillor Growan. John, do you want to?
Yes, I can confirm that the Police and Crime Plan set by the Police and Crime Commissioner stays in place. I intend to work towards nothing other than that in any transitional period. That's supported by a whole host of West Yorkshire Police operational strategic and plans that I intend to make no changes to. So I can confirm that the direction of travel and the continuity of the approach will remain. And I just reaffirm my operational independence and my apolitical status.
Thank you, Chief Constable.
Chair, if I could just comment
Okay,
on
Mark,
that particular aspect as well, to try and give some reassurance. I mean, clearly, Peter, the Police and Crime Plan, as the Chief has just said, is in place, and obviously whoever's elected as Mayor will come in and adopt that plan in the short term, but they will then have a duty, whoever that is, to develop a new police and crime plan. But I wouldn't expect that to come into being really until later in the year, or perhaps even into next year. So just to provide some reassurance around the current priorities within the police and crime plan.
Thank you very much. I mean, we have discussed at great length, particularly the neighbourhood policing issues and the prominence the panel has agreed with you and the Chief on that. And my questioning was really to see a continuity in those particular plans.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Growan. Can we move on just finally? I know the Mayor will be keen to appoint a Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner at a very short notice, and the panel is mindful that we would need at least 72 hours minimum because of members standing down. We don't know who and the quorum issues. So, you know, that's something we just want to bring to Combined Authority's attention.
Thank you.
If it's possible.
Thank you. That's well understood. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So can I thank Ben for this item and the presentation they've given us and provided all the information. You don't have to stay now. If you want to, you're more than welcome. So look forward to meeting you again.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we will move on to item 6 now. Do we have Trevor Lake in attendance?
We do.
Okay.
Yeah, good morning, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Good morning, Trevor. Thank you for coming and joining us and giving a presentation and talk about the report you've provided to the panel. If you want to go through that, and then if anybody on how you will work with the new system of elected mayor, metro mayor, and then if panel want to ask any clarification or questions, you will, I'm sure, will be happy to answer.
Yeah, very happy to do so. I'll spare you a presentation. You've all got the papers. you've had adequate time to read them. What I propose to do is just give you a little overview of where we are, and then I'll just look at the papers. If we take Appendix C first, which is a sort of an update around devolution, then I'll talk you through the key points on Appendix A, which is the Audit Committee Annual Report, and then the key points on Appendix B, which is the Ethics Committee Annual Report. But I would just start off by saying I think this whole transitional process has been an excellent support from Alan, who was on earlier, and the rest of his team across the OPCC office, from Mark and all his team there. I've been involved with quite a lot of acquisitions, mergers, whatever you want to call them, over the years. I have to say I've been very impressed with the quality and standard of this work and the attitude people have brought to the table in getting things done, which has been first class. I also want to just note, before I go into the detail, a thanks to Catherine Johnson, who, as you know, Nigel stood down as Chief Finance Officer at the Force in December, and Catherine took over that role, was successfully appointed, but she also kept running the OPCC office finance across the two organisations in the light of this being a new arrangement post-May, and also the very supportive team of Julie Reid and the others at the office who've helped through that process. They've done a great job. In terms of Appendix C, which is around the devolution update, which I think members would probably be interested to know, I'll take you down to item 10, the last paragraph. It's basically saying that the proposal is a status quo of each committee is maintained until the operational implications of the audit are fully understood. And at that point, there'll be a joint review undertaken to assess the most efficient and effective arrangements for the statutory performance of each committee going forward. So basically, all members of this committee have been given an extension through to, I think, 31st of March 2022 to enable a transitional period and some stability going forward, which will enable the new mayor and deputy mayor to decide what they would like to do. We will therefore be required to support the Chief Constable. The Chief Constable, as you know, will be a corporation soul in its own right, and we'll be looking at the accounts for that, and we will also be reporting to the Governance and Audit Committee of the Combined Authority on the overall accounts. Further down that page, that's highlighted in item 15, which explains the arrangements going forward for next year around the accounts. Internal audit arrangements will stay as they are, with internal auditing already transferred over to be within the Force employment schedule. And then there are just some slight tweaks to the joint committee's terms of reference to reflect those changes in responsibility. I take you then to item A, which is the bit I normally come to you once a year to give you an update on what have we been doing all year. What we do, we take our terms of reference on the left-hand side of the page there, and on the right, we fill in against those terms of reference where we think we've delivered on them. We've received regular updates on the devolution progress throughout the year. And as I said, that's been a very impressive piece of work from the transition team. I sit on the PCC's Good Governance Group as an independent member, which is a very useful forum to consider some other points outside of the committee's core remit. And I also assisted in the recruitment of the OPCC Chief of Staff back in November as an independent panel member. Further down that page, item 5, something we worked on over the last couple of years that colleagues that may be involved with NHS or other organisations might be familiar with, an assurance framework which is linked to the Commissioner's objectives. Took a bit of work to get it up and running, a lot of work initially by Neil of Internal Audit, then picked up by the Force and supported to make it come to life. A very, very good piece of work. That I'd recommend is carried forward by the Mayor's Office as a good piece of assurance work on how the organisation is performing against its objectives. We've received updates on risk management. Again, this is a very effective process headed by risk management team that are very effective in updating the risk across the organisation. In particular at the Force, the risk management is an excellent process, and I attend once a year the Force Risk Management Group to be assured of the process around risk and how it's being picked up throughout the organisation. It happens that was earlier this week, and I did attend it, and again I'm very assured by that process. It's headed by the Deputy Chief Constable. Beverly is the lead on risk that reports into it, and she also then reports to the Audit Committee. So we have assurance on that area. A couple of other points just to bring to your attention. Item 9, we've received reports on NPAS governance, which we've been keeping an eye on throughout the year, and we regularly scrutinise the internal audit performance against their work plan, which is at item 13 there. We've had a number of things over and above what we'd normally look at during the year, one of which is at item 16, where we had further reports on seized cash and the use of cryptocurrency. We looked at workforce planning and future constables and assessors on the back of reports received from internal audit. And then finally, item 22, we consider the reports from external audit at each meeting of the committee. The other point to bring to members' attention is that we always have a private pre-meet before each committee meeting, where we meet just with ourselves, committee members, and internal and external audit in private to hear if there are any concerns that they want to raise with us in private without the officers present, and they're addressed accordingly. There have been no major points raised in any of those meetings during the year. Just to talk you quickly through then Appendix B, which is the Ethics Committee, key points against the terms of reference. So again, the whole purpose of the Ethics Committee, a key role of it is to look at the process and the assurance process, so we don't get involved in the individual operational ethical considerations. The force has its own ethics committee to do that, which is very effective and very well run. But we tend to step back and look at the process around it, and are the various mechanisms in place to give the public assurance. And we looked at a number of items throughout the year, including around PDR completion rates, for example, and training records and policies. We randomly picked 2 or 3 policies for each meeting to have a look at, have a deep dive into, make sure they're fit for purpose and feedback to the force. The force have been extremely proactive in picking up the points we've raised and dealing with them. And for example, one item that came up this year was that because of pressures on the force, a number of policies had fallen out of date. They have been very effective in picking that up and driving the change through on that, and I think they're probably up to about 85% plus now by the end of the year. That was the item further down the page there. We've also looked at casework and complaints of PCC. We look at training that's carried out. We look at complaint handling. We requested a report on the use of force after several referral of cases to the IOPC, and we also received reports on the positive action and recruitment campaign as to what the force is doing to support its BAME recruitment. The other point to pick up is that we received updates on the rolling out of unconscious bias training, and all members of the committee have now completed that themselves. So I think that really concludes the key points I wanted to bring to your attention for the past 12 months, and very happy to take any questions from colleagues.
Thank you, Trevor. Do any panel members want to comment or question on Trevor's presentation and reports?
I will, please,
okay.
Chair.
Roger Grasby, independent member.
Yeah, morning, Trevor.
Morning.
How are you? Nice to see you again.
Good, and you?
There are actually an awful lot of questions I could ask about this, but I'll try and be selective. Trevor, we don't get a lot of information in these 2 reports as to what you actually found as a result of your investigation. It tells us what you did and the scope of the committee. So I'll just pick a couple, if I may, and see where that takes us. If you referred to paragraph section 13 in Appendix A, the outcome of internal audit reports, you know from earlier discussions with me that key is the management response to an internal audit and the speed by which they implement, particularly the high-level recommendations. What did you find, generally speaking, in respect of both those two aspects, management responses to internal audit and the speed by which high-level recommendations are in fact implemented?
Yeah, thanks, Roger. I mean, obviously, all the details of those points will be picked up in the minutes of our meetings. But I think what we found over the year, one of the points we did find, generally speaking, good. We did find on, I think, one occasion that there was a delay in getting the for the committee to take the audit report because of the delay in management response. So we actually made a decision that going forward, if the management response has not been done in the time frame requested, that the report is to come to audit committee anyway with a note saying that, and that we would like to see it as on an interim basis, because as you quite rightly say, particularly where it's maybe inadequate assurance, it needs dealing with quite quickly and a reassuring that the points are being picked up. Generally speaking, time frame good, management responses are good, but there have been one or two instances where we weren't entirely happy, and we have now put something in place to address that.
And across the reports as a whole, without being absolutely accurate, what percentage gave full assurance as opposed to limited assurance or even no assurance?
I couldn't tell you the exact figures, Roger, but we did look at it, and it was in line with previous years. There was no outliers there that gave us any cause for concern.
Okay, good. And if I could just ask a couple of questions about the Ethics Committee. I must say the remit is far, far wider than any other Ethics Committee I've ever seen in my life. In fact, it goes beyond the definition of ethics by miles to me. However, all good stuff. A couple of issues there you refer to. You refer to looking at, for example, at disproportionality for stop and search. Now, that's been something that the panel has been exercised in for many years. Are you able to say what conclusions you found from that particular piece of work?
Yeah, it's a good point, Roger, about the scope of this group, isn't it? And I think that's something the Mayor's office will want to pick up and have a look at. What we try and do is, because we don't have the depth and I suppose we don't have the depth and the time to go into these in huge detail, what we look at is there a process in place to capture the information? Is the information being captured, and is it being addressed, and what's being done as a result? And that's what we try and focus our time on. And in that respect, yes, there is a process in place. The force is aware of it, it is dealing with it, and they will report back. If we see any anomalies in that, they address matters quite quickly and get back to us to do so. It's our role to point out to them areas that we feel they should look at, and it's for them to go away and make that deliberation as to whether they want to put it in place straight away or they want to handle it a different way.
And if I may just pick one other, you've also say you looked at the police force's response to the implementation of the COVID regulations during the past year. Again, what conclusions are you able to share with us about your findings there?
Yeah, again, we looked at, did they have a response? Did they have a plan? Did they go about it? There was quite detailed reporting came back that was pretty clear that despite for all of those of us involved with COVID over the last over a year now, isn't it? The reaction, particularly around PPE, we received quite a detailed report on it, which explained what happened in the early days and why, and the transition from perhaps local force activity across to a national activity and how that impacted force and its ability to deliver some of its PPE. So I think the force had a very good process in place. They were very aware of what was going on. They have a very good plan around it. So we were assured that the process and the planning around it was effective.
Okay, finally, and this is a shame because it detracts, in my head, good reports, but the reports are headed, the report from the chair of the Joint Independent Audit and Ethics Committee, yet assigned by the governance manager from the OPCC, which could construe something lacking a degree of independence. I wonder what your response is to that.
I don't have a problem with it. I mean, these are the papers that came to our committee, so they probably just haven't been amended to reflect maybe coming here. I think they've been taken from our papers at the committee to make sure there was no confusion over what was being reported. I can assure you and the other members that this committee is a very independent process. It's not influenced by either the Chief Constable or the Police and Crime Commissioner or any officers in either of those organisations. And I think people that know me know I'm a fairly robust, independent individual and wouldn't put up with any such interference. So Julie Reid, as I said, has taken over the role as governance manager, has done an absolutely first-class job in looking after us as a committee, and is very mindful of our independence, and we are always treated accordingly. So it's something we can have a look at for next year's submissions to the panel, but I'm not duly concerned about it.
Thank you, Trevor. Roger, any more questions, Roger?
Oh, I've had more than my share, Chair.
Okay, thank you. You have. Any other comments or questions from any of the panel members for Trevor? I think you've taken up everybody's questions, Roger. Well done.
Okay, well, you're very welcome. Thank you for your time today, and good luck. It seems a very strange situation, isn't it, that we have such a big organisation, 2.5 weeks to go. We don't know who's going to be in charge, and we don't know how they're going to be appointed as the deputy. So I wish you good luck with that, because I think that's quite a challenging situation for you all.
It is a lot of work to do, very challenging times. So I guess there's no other questions or comments for Roger, not Trevor, and his reports. So therefore, Trevor, can I thank you on behalf of the panel for all the work you have done over the year, and it will continue, I hope, in future as well, like always. So thank you very much for attending, and if you want to stay, you can, and if you want to leave, it's up to you.
Chair,
Very much.
It's Mark. If I could just comment before
Yes,
Trevor
Mark.
leaves the meeting.
Okay, Commissioner.
Just to pass on my thanks to Trevor and his colleagues on the Joint Audit and Ethics Committee. I really value their role and the work that they've undertaken with colleagues in the office and across the West Yorkshire Police and the organisation. So just a thank you, Trevor, from me to you and colleagues on the committee.
Thank you very much, Mark. I really appreciate that. Thank you, and likewise. Thank you very much, Chair, and enjoy the rest of your meeting.
Thank you, Trevor.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye. Okay, so item 7, update to panel rules and procedures, and the reports are attached, and I'm sure you will all read them. Is there any comments or questions on the rules and procedures or clarifications required by panel members? We had a pre-discussion in the pre-meeting, and Sharon's given some explanation, clarifications. But does anybody want to comment or question? So we consider and agree the draft amended panel rules and procedures. So I guess silence means we all agree.
I guess Sharon wants to come in there on the complaints.
Okay, Sharon.
Yes, Chair, thank you. Chair, I think in terms of the first two documents, the legal compliance rules and the rules of conduct of business, that they could certainly be put to members for approval. There has been one minor issue raised in relation to the complaints procedure. So, Chair, you may wish to decide whether to either adjourn that for consideration at the next meeting, once I've had the opportunity to give the panel some further advice in relation to that matter, or alternatively to approve it subject to clarification on that particular point being provided and brought back to the next meeting. Chair, a third approach might be to look at the detail and the wording in this meeting, but perhaps, Chair, given timescales, it might be something better done outside of the meeting so that panel members have the opportunity to consider any amendment that might be proposed in proper time.
Yeah, I think we would agree to defer or approve subject to conditions, as you suggest, the second suggestion. So is our panel members in agreement to that?
Yeah.
Yes, Chair.
Okay.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we approve, subject to one item for clarification to be brought to next panel. Okay, thank you. So then that leads us to item 8, the independent panel member recruitment. You've seen the attached report, so we're asking for extension for another short term until autumn, until things have settled with the election of mayor and all the changes and transition period, and after the AGM. So are we all in agreement to that? And the declaration of interest has been declared by the 2 independent panel members. So do all other panel members agree with this?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, we're all in agreement to item 8 as per report attached. Okay, item 9, Commissioner's response to any current issues. Can I hand over to Mark, Commissioner?
Yeah, of course, Chair. And as you said at the outset, this is the last panel meeting of my term as Police and Crime Commissioner, and clearly some of the members of the panel in terms of the term of office for yourselves. So if you will just bear with me, I'll just probably say a few more things than normal, but yeah. Certainly in terms of current issues, I just wanted to echo, Chair, what you said at the outset regarding the Duke of Edinburgh. And obviously I put out my own comments in paying respects for the Duke, and obviously thoughts and prayers with the Queen and the wider royal family. But it had some special resonance for me as well because of the visit that the Duke of Edinburgh made in 2015 to officially open our training facilities at Cargate, and I did get a fair bit of time actually to spend with him in discussion before that ceremony took place, and it was a very enlightening and a memorable experience. So all the things that you've heard about the Duke regarding his inquisitiveness and his knowledge was certainly plain for me to see. And I did attend a short ceremony at Wakefield Cathedral last Friday, and I was pleased to do that. But again, I just wanted to mark my respects on behalf of the office as well. Chair, I'm sorry to hear about Councillor Naeem. Please pass on my best wishes to him. I probably will try and make contact with him directly to pass on my best wishes, but obviously I'm hoping that he can recover from the current illness, but sad to hear about that. In terms of current policing issues, I've been continuing to meet on a weekly basis with the Chief Constable through the Operation Ginman reports, which we've spoke about before at panel meetings, and obviously that was put in place really since the onset of COVID. And some of you might be aware that there was an HMIC FRS report that came out this week talking about the policing response to COVID, and actually West Yorkshire were one of those forces that were inspected as part of that report, and there's some really positive comments in the report actually about some of the things that West Yorkshire Police have put in place. But more than that, I just wanted to really echo my experience of how I think West Yorkshire Police have stepped up to the challenges in the last 12 months, and it has been extremely difficult at times, clearly because of some of the concerns in the initial days around the availability of protective equipment, and then the whole business of infection rates and social distancing, and obviously that still remains with us, but thankfully, as we're now seeing the infection rates coming down. But again, I did put out a statement earlier this week in relation to that report, and I absolutely wanted to recognise the contribution of West Yorkshire Police working with our partners and with our communities across West Yorkshire in the last 12 months. And I mean, obviously, violent crime, unfortunately, is something that is always with us. But obviously, we had a very nasty incident over in the Leeds area in Swarcliffe, and I've been liaising closely with the Chief Constable and West Yorkshire Police around that incident, and obviously it is a live investigation, but it's an indicator, I guess, of some of the real challenges out there as we come out of some of the restrictions and perhaps some of the the violent crime. We're very mindful of trying to make sure we are responding to that. And one of the things, obviously, that I've been very pleased about in the last couple of years is the establishment of the Violence Reduction Unit. And again, pleased to say that following a lot of lobbying, although perhaps lobbying is not a great term to use at the moment, but in the right way around seeking additional funding for the Violence Reduction Unit. And I'm pleased to say the government did agree that the funding would continue for at least another 12 months. But again, I've been very clear, because I hold the national portfolio around this for police and crime commissioners, that funding needs to extend for me at least over the duration of the next comprehensive spending review. So we're hoping that will be a 3-year settlement later this year. But again, I've been very clear that that if we are going to see a long-term impact on reducing violence and tackling violent crime, this needs to be a sustained effort into early intervention and prevention. And the Violence Reduction Unit, working with West Yorkshire Police and many of our partners, particularly in the community safety partnerships, are absolutely undertaking a plethora of excellent projects across West Yorkshire. So I'm hoping that at future meetings, Chair, I'm sure you'll have updates from the Violence Reduction Unit that will go into more detail about that. But I just wanted to say a big thanks to all the staff at the Violence Reduction Unit for the progress that they are making. As you know, we are still recruiting at a pace at the moment, and we have regular updates regarding the trajectory of that recruitment. And as you know, we had a robust discussion at the budget meeting where we set the precept about that recruitment, and in my view that is vital in terms of maintaining that level of recruitment, but also trying to increase the diversity of the workforce as much as possible in the next 2 to 3 years, because of that recruitment profile that will continue. So that, I think, will remain a priority whatever happens following the election in a couple of weeks' time. And actually, I was reflecting on my time, not just as Police and Crime Commissioner, but also I joined the Police Authority nearly 23 years ago, and worked with some of you, obviously, as Chair of the Police Authority, and obviously as the Police and Crime Commissioner, with some of you as the members of the panel. And you know, so it's a long journey, but one that I've hugely enjoyed and actually been privileged to enjoy in terms of being elected into this PCC role in particular. And what I've tried to do is you know, make sure that we have strong partnerships in place. As you know, I've done a lot of work at the national level. I chaired both the Association of Police Authorities as the outgoing chair before standing down to run for election as the Police and Crime Commissioner, and 3 years ago was elected as the national chair of the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners. So I've tried to make sure that the best interests of West Yorkshire have been represented not only locally but at the national level as well. And I think that's hugely important moving forward again for whoever takes up the mayoral role, because West Yorkshire, you know, is as we know, a big place, represents a population of more than 2.2 million. We are the 4th largest police force in England and Wales, and it's extremely important that we have the representation at that national level. So I certainly hope that will continue. As you know, again, just looking back at some of it, I'm really proud about the Safer Communities Fund that was established from the proceeds of crime, and we had a celebration event about that very recently. 3.8 million funding distributed to more than 800 groups across West Yorkshire. And actually, one of the most enjoyable parts of the role has been being able to visit and talk to many of those groups who are making such a huge difference at the grassroots level on the ground, and particularly in the last 12 months. We all know that many of the challenges have been exacerbated because of the COVID situation, but we're proud of that. And also the setting up of the anti-slavery partnership in West Yorkshire. And I've led on some of that work nationally in setting up the national network for police and crime commissioners, and also the achievement of a long-held vision around the sexual assault referral centre that we set up in partnership with the NHS last year, ahead of all the current issues, the Sarah Everard case, and all the agenda around violence against women and girls. We've absolutely recognised that agenda some time ago, and I think we have facilities there in place that, in my view, are second to none around dealing with very vulnerable victims. And just on the violence against women and girls, with the Chief Constable, we hosted a very successful online event last week where many women's groups and organisations were represented, and we've already started that dialogue around making sure we try to influence the various bits of legislation that are going through Parliament at the moment, whether that's the domestic abuse bill or the wider police crime and sentencing bill, which is very all-encompassing, but is absolutely something that needs to be carefully monitored and positively influenced throughout the course of the passage of that bill in Parliament. So I hope as a panel you will absolutely take a look at that yourselves and get involved. And then finally, Chair, just to say a few things and thank yous. So a thank you to you as Chair of the panel, to the previous Chair of the panel, but to all members of the panel. Clearly at times we have disagreements and robust debates, but that's the nature of this role. It's a very interesting one, and actually goes much more than beyond policing, as you know. Also a big thanks to John Robbins, who I know is on the line as our current chief, our previous chiefs. But I think again, whatever the arrangements moving forward, I would hope you would think that West Yorkshire Police, I think, is in a good place in terms of leadership and setting a solid platform to move forward. But of course, we can never be complacent because of the challenges that lie ahead. and I've mentioned violent crime, safeguarding issues around tackling child sexual exploitation, and issues of protest and the policing bill that I've talked about, where we've seen protests turn into violent activity in places like Bristol and London. But I'm pleased to say so far that the protests that have taken place in West Yorkshire have been relatively peaceful. And again, I pay tribute to the police in the way that they've approached that in the face of difficult and confusing regulations, often to actually try and enforce. So, with the change to the mayoral model, I've always seen this as an evolution of governance. As was said earlier on the presentation, there are similar models in place in Greater Manchester and London, and it's probably going to be the case that more of these types of mayoral models that encompass the policing aspects will come forward for the elections in 2024. So with that, Chair, I just want to say a huge thank you. It's been a huge privilege to be the Police and Crime Commissioner since 2012, and most of all to the public of West Yorkshire who have elected me into this role, and I've given it my best shot and done my best, and hopefully overall it's seen as a positive contribution. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner, for all the good work you have done over the years. I'll add my bit in any other business, but I'll give the panel members an opportunity to ask or make any comments or contributions on this item. Okay. Fine. Yeah. So we're done with item 9. Thank you, Commissioner, for the detailed information, the work you have done, and as it is your last panel meeting, so thank you. Item 10, publish key decisions. This is just for panel to report a note. And item 11, agreed action log. The action has been updated with some actions marked on for the panel to pick up with new elected mayor.
Yeah, as you know, Chair, we've been liaising with yourself and Sam in just trying to make sure that business as usual and planning ahead is in place around key elements of the police and crime plan. But obviously it is subject to a mayor being elected and them looking at that. But hopefully, it provides a reasonable platform around the work programme moving forward.
Thank you, Commissioner. Item 12, we've got the forward agenda to note. And we will adopt the changes with the mayor takes on police and crime functions in future. And item 13, there's no complaints. And item 14, as we all have mentioned that this is our last panel meeting for this current police and crime panel year, and I know also there's some members who are standing down, so I would like to thank them. Councillor Peter Gruen, I'd like to thank him for his contribution on the panel for the last 2 years. And especially we would like to thank, because Councillor Naeem is not present, and he's had to stand down due to illness, and I think due to his illness it would be good for the panel to write a letter for a letter of best wishes to Councillor Naeem, because he's not here at the moment. So Sam, if we could write a letter on behalf of the panel thanking him for the contribution he has made, and especially he's been one of the complaints panel members, the subcommittee, and we wish him best with his illness. And finally, since it's Commissioner's last meeting, I would like to thank Mark Burns-Williamson for his dedication and commitment to the, as his promise and intent to keep the people of West Yorkshire safe and feeling safe. You've mentioned so many projects and work you have done, and you've reached out to the communities and visiting the localities to actually meet the local members of public. You know, you've mentioned, so there's so much to mention, the work you have done over the years. You introduced Safer Communities Fund, distributing £3.77 million of grants to over 800 community projects, which have made a huge impact, which is one of the great achievements. You've run numerous campaigns, including dangers of money laundering, drink and drive campaign, child criminal exploitation awareness, hate crime, speeding. You've launched so many strategies, victims and witness strategy, reducing the offending. You've set up violence reduction unit, as you have said, and we'd like to thank the team who have done so much work in that section in terms of reducing crime. You mentioned the establishment of SARC facility to help victims of serious sexual violence. So from a panel perspective, that you have always been willing to listen to our views and take on board the panel's suggestions and recommendations. You've always provided necessary information and undertook the work of the PCC and the force. So on behalf of the panel, Mark, I would wish you I would like to thank you for all the work you have done over the years in terms of making West Yorkshire a safe place. And we don't know, there's so much uncertainties. I don't know if I'll be on the panel next year. So can I thank all the panel members for supporting me and the panel staff, and also the Chief Constable for coming to every meeting. I know some forces that the Chief Constables don't attend the panel meetings, or very rarely attend the panel meetings. So we are very grateful of the working partnership and relationship we've had in the past during my term of office as Chair of West Yorkshire Police and Crime Panel. So can I thank everybody and conclude with the thanking words? Does any other panel member have any comments to make? I think I've spoken for everybody.
Yeah.
Chair?
Yes, Chair.
John Robbins.
Chief Constable.
May I put on public record the thanks to Mark Burns-Williamson for 23 years of public service, his oversight, governance, interest support and scrutiny of West Yorkshire Police over all of those years has got us to the place we are today. I think, Mark, you've got that balance of public accountability and scrutiny with advocacy and support of West Yorkshire Police just right. So on behalf of all of the officers and staff of West Yorkshire Police, thank you for your public service. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chief Constable.
Chair,
Okay.
thank you very much for your concluding comments and clearly to John as well. So really appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. So we conclude today's meeting and wish everybody a success in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Cheers, Mark. Thanks.
Thank you.
Much.
Thanks, Chair.
All the best, Mark.
Thank you.